Hi, everyone. Welcome back. I'm your host, Samantha Reigle, and I've spent more than 20 years as a mediator helping people navigate conflict. But here on this podcast, I like to look at why conflict shows up at all and then how we can respond in ways that can help us determine what happens next. I've been away for a few weeks enjoying spring break with the family, and I hope you've all had a chance to step away a little too, even if it's just mentally. There is something about stepping out of your normal routine that gives you a little bit of space to breathe, space to think, and sometimes just space to notice what's still going on with you and what's happening. And for a lot of people, what's sitting there isn't rest. It's something maybe unresolved. So today I want to talk about one of those things that tends to linger longer than we expect. You're never going to get the apology. You're never going to get the other person to fully validate and understand the harm they have caused you. And that can be a very difficult realization. A lot of people get stuck with that. They think, I can't move on until I get it, until they admit, until they say what they did was wrong, because look at all this harm that I've endured because of what they did. I can tell you, what I've seen as a mediator doing this work is that most of the time, we don't ever get the apology. And if we do get an apology at all, it's often a pretty weak one. It might sound like, hey, I'm sorry you felt that way, which usually just kind of makes things a little worse. Even in legal situations, most settlement agreements have a no admission clause, meaning the conflict is resolved without any formal acknowledgement of harm. So then how do you move on when you're never going to get that validation you feel like you need? I can tell you that the way that I perceive conflict is that it opens up this portal opportunity, and that's where you're standing. You have a decision to make. You have a decision to make whether you're going to leave behind a story in which someone else calls your situation your harm in order to walk through a door where you no longer need the other person to read that story the same way that you do. And when I say this, I'm not saying that you're negating what happened to you. It absolutely happened. You know in your heart what has happened to you. You did not imagine it. You don't need to forgive it. I don't even like that word forgiveness in the context of conflict because I feel like in some way it overlooks responsibility, and I'm not asking you to do that. I'm asking you to see that you have options of acknowledging a story that's happened to you and choosing how it ends. Again, you know in your heart what has happened. You know how it affected you. And at some point, you have to decide whether you're going to keep waiting for them to confirm your reality or whether you're going to move forward without their agreement and their apology. That's the shift. That's the conflict portal moment. You stop saying, I need them to acknowledge it so I can move on. And you start saying, I know what happened. Now, what do I do with it? What do I want to do with it? And like I said, I see this all the time. And in mediation, when people are stuck waiting for an apology, they literally cannot see anything else in front of them. They come in focused on the one outcome that they've imagined that they needed, which is an acknowledgement of what the other person did so that they could move on. And when they don't get that and they're so focused on it, they miss the multiple other paths to resolution that are sitting right there because they can't see them. They can't even hear what's coming out of everybody's mouth. And that's where I come in as a mediator. So, my role isn't to force an apology. It's to help them to start to see what other options exist, what moving forward could actually look like, and what becomes available if they stop trying to get that apology. And when they're able, even just for a little, to put down that need for validation, they will be able to see there's a different agreement that can be made, a different boundary, a different exit, a different way forward. Not because we've asked the other party to change, but because they have. and how they view their situation. And sometimes, of course, it goes through and sometimes it doesn't. Because if someone is still gripping their story so hard and they need that acknowledgement, it doesn't even matter what the options are in front of them. They're not going to take them. They're stuck in what I call the fog. They like to replay that situation over and over again and thinking, maybe if I explain it another way, maybe if I say it differently, maybe if I get them to see this one part of the story and throw different versions of the story at them, hoping that it's going to land and they're finally going to get that acknowledgement that this person caused them harm. But you know what? When you're in the fog, you're not moving forward. You're circling it again and again and again. After a while, it feels like you can't even see clearly anymore. Again, not because there aren't options. There's always options. It's because when you're in the fog, your energy is going back into something that's already happened. And as long as you're doing that, you're not going to see what's actually available to you. And this just doesn't happen in mediation. Most of us don't have a mediator sitting next to us in our real lives. But a lot of times the options are still there. Right? Maybe there's like someone in your life, a friend, a partner, a parent, who is trying to talk to you about different ways you can move forward and you're not able to see it and you're not able to hear them because you're still locked in on needing that validation, that apology from the person who hurt you. So the real shift is this. You don't need their agreement to move forward. You don't need them to read it the same way in order for it to be true. And the moment you stop needing the other person to validate your story is the moment you start getting your power back. That's my hope for you. I want you to feel powerful. And when that happens, you can actually ask, what do I want to do now? If it's a job, maybe it means taking your skills somewhere where they're a better fit. If it's a relationship, maybe it means taking your heart somewhere it can expand instead of contract. But whatever the situation is, once you put that need down for an apology, validation, even a little, you'll start to see what's next for you. It's not going to be maybe one huge giant leap or one big huge step, but you'll see the next right step. And that'll be enough. That'll be enough to move you through the portal from taking you from sitting in that fog of misalignment through the portal so you can find where you're more aligned. Okay? It's never about getting the perfect apology. It's about reaching the point where you can say, this happened to me, I know it happened, and now I get to decide how it changes me moving forward. So at this point in our conversation, you might be thinking, okay, that all sounds great in theory. I get it emotionally. I get it psychologically. But how do I actually let go of needing the apology? Like practically, right? Because we've talked a lot about how it's holding me back by needing that apology, but like, how do I let that go? How do I close that chapter in the book? How do I move forward if I don't have a mediator sitting next to me or a therapist guiding me through that process? And truly, that is a very fair question. Because it is one thing to understand, and then there's, the other side of it, which is accessing it. So here's how I would approach this as a mediator. One of the first things I do when I'm coaching someone through it is I stop letting people stay in their story. I'm not trying to be dismissive with them, but I want to direct them towards a new line of thinking. Okay? So if someone keeps replaying what happened over and over and over again, trying to convince me why they are the victim in this situation and how they have been harmed, nothing new can enter that conversation. So what I do is I shift that line of discussion, inquiry. Instead of asking questions about the facts and getting clarification around what happened, I start to ask them about the future, and I'll say something like, what do you want tomorrow to look like if you don't have to deal with this situation anymore? If you don't have to deal with this person? If you don't have to interact, around this whole drama? I don't say drama because, that's dismissive, but if you don't have to interact with these people, if you didn't have to tell this story again, what would tomorrow actually look and feel like for you? Would you sleep through the night without waking up thinking about this? Would you wake up with energy? Would you finally feel a sense of relief in your body? Would you feel light or maybe just not as heavy? And I'll let them sit with that because something really important happens in moments like that. For the first time, they're not going to be focused on what already happened. They're going to start to feel into what's possible next. And you can totally do this on your own. You do not need a mediator to ask you that question. You can literally pause and ask yourself, if I didn't have to carry this anymore, what would my tomorrow feel like and look like? Just to be really simple, okay? You're human. Feel what your body would feel like if you could just close this chapter of the story. Does it feel calmer? Do you feel more energy? Do you actually feel maybe you're more exhausted and you need a day to relax because you've just let go of something heavy? So the answer to all these questions would be your starting point. That's where you figure out where your next step is. So again, I know what you're all thinking. What does that next step actually look like practically? How can I do it? Because once you've started to imagine what tomorrow could feel like, once you've stopped replaying the story for a moment, this is where the real work begins. Now you know how you want to feel. Now you know what you want your tomorrow to look like. So the question is, how do you get it from here, from needing the apology, needing the validation, needing the other person to see it your way, to where you want to be? How you want to feel. Guys, I will say every situation is different. Not all one size fit all, right? Okay, let's just think about some different examples. If you're going through a divorce or you're ending a relationship and you feel like the other person caused all of the harm, a lot of people get stuck in needing that person to take equal responsibility in the resolution. And when I say equal responsibility, I don't mean 50-50 split between the both individuals that are ending the relationship. I'm talking about if they cause 90% of the harm and it's all their fault, then they need to be equal parts, 90% part responsible for the resolution, right? They need to own the resolution. They need to make this right. I'm not bending. They caused this. And sometimes that shows up very practically, like wanting a larger financial outcome because it proves that you were on the right side of what happened. And it acknowledges, I gave more, I did more, I was treated unfairly. And I totally understand that. But here's the question I would ask in mediation is, what is it costing you to stay in that line of thinking? Not just financially, I'm talking about emotionally, mentally, energetically. Because if you're dealing with someone who is never going to acknowledge what they did, then every step you take trying to get them to make it right is actually keeping you tied to them. Energetically, physically, mentally, in every aspect, you are tied to them making it right for you. You're still negotiating for acknowledgement, just in a different form. So what does the shift actually look like? I'm not saying that you have to say, fine, I'll take less and be okay with it. I'm saying that you sit with yourself and you ask, what outcome would actually allow me to feel free? Not justified, not validated, free. And sometimes those are not the same thing because freedom might look like resolving it faster, taking a settlement that's not necessarily good enough, removing yourself from the dynamic sooner, Not because it's perfectly fair, but because it releases you. And that's the trade-off. You're no longer optimizing for being right. You're optimizing for just being done. And that's a very different decision. Okay? Same thing with an employment situation. If you're waiting for an apology or validation from a company who you believe has harmed you, or a manager who has harmed you in some way, or coworker, you're waiting for that before you can move on. A practical step might be to start applying to other jobs. Not because you have to leave tomorrow, but because it shifts your focus from, I need them to make this better for me. They harmed me. They need to acknowledge it and make it better. To, hey, where do I want to go next? And that shift means you're no longer sitting in the experience. You're building something beyond it. Let's look at the friendship example. Let's say you were betrayed and you're waiting for that person to acknowledge the betrayal. Maybe the shift would be moving forward. You can look at how you can establish boundaries. Look at what would make you feel safe in relationships moving forward, and then actually implementing that. Not waiting for the person that betrayed you to become someone different, but deciding who you're going to be in connection with others. Okay? So this is the part that matters most. These shifts from needing validation and an apology to focusing on how you want to feel in the future when you no longer are dealing with the situation and how you get yourself there. Every one of these steps is going to involve a trade-off. You're not going to get full acknowledgement or validation or apology or the exact version of fairness you wanted. But in exchange of all that, you're going to get movement. You're going to get clarity. You're going to get your energy back. You're going to get your life back. You have to decide what you're optimizing for, validation or freedom. Because a lot of times you don't get both. So here is the honest truth. There is no single clear pathway. There's no checklist that takes you from I need an apology to I'm fully at peace. But there is a direction, and the direction is if you stop organizing your decisions around what they have done and you start organizing your decisions around how you want to feel next. And when you do that, the steps actually start to become a lot more clear. You're no longer looking backwards. You're not trying to fix something that's already happened. You're looking forward. And when you do that, the steps will actually start to become a lot more clear because you're no longer looking backwards, right? Trying to fix something that's already happened. You're going to start looking forward. And when you're in that space, all these small steps and decisions that you're going to take that are going to feel good are going to move you forward and toward that feeling that you've imagined yourself feeling the next day. And if you really are truly stuck in the fog and you can't see the steps forward, this is where the people around you can actually help. If you have a mediator, great. Therapist, partner, friend, spouse, anyone around you who can see clearly. They've probably already been trying to help you, but you haven't been hearing them. Maybe now you'll start to reach out and start to try to take their advice a little bit and see how it feels. They might be able to see the practical steps you can take to move forward and help you provide a little bit of distance from the story. Okay, that little bit of distance from the story is going to help you recognize that there are options, and they've probably been there all along. So if you're in this right now and something's happened to you and you're waiting on that apology that doesn't seem to be coming, I just want you to consider this. The truth is, You already know what happened. You already carry the clarity you've been asking them to give you. And once you stop waiting for them to confirm it, you can start building something beyond it. Just one step that moves you towards that feeling of being lighter, clearer, more like yourself again. And that's the shift. That's what this conflict in your life is showing you. It's a portal moment. You have the power to move beyond it and create a life that's more aligned. Have experiences that are more aligned. Thanks for tuning in, and I will meet you here next week. As always, don't react, but respond with intention.